šiandien mes turim neįtikėtiną galimybę susitikti su vienos iš mūsų naujų knygų, Matildos efektas autorė, Ellie Irving, ir pakalbėti su ja apie Matildos visą vidų, visą veiksmą. Ellie tikriausiai galbūt dar ne visiems žinoma Lietuvoje. Ellie yra knygų vaikams autorė, įvertinta tokiais apdovanojimais kaip Whole Children's Book Award, Pre-Chronos 2019 Award, Stockholm Book Award and others. Ir daug kitų. Ir what a handful of awards you got.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, and what is important about Ellie, she's the author of Matilda's Effect, a book that was published by Nieko Rimto. It's our publishing house, just a few weeks ago. And so, Ellie, can you just shortly introduce yourself? Like very shortly, because I already did.
Okay.
Then I will start questioning some bits and bobs about the book.
Okay. So yes, hello, my name is Ellie Irving. I am the author of the Matilda Effect. There we go, Matilda's Effectus. It's my 5th book that I've written. I've been writing professionally since 2011. I don't know really where the stories come from, but I keep writing them. I currently live in a place called Southend-on-Sea, which is in England. It's about an hour away from London. I'm married with a son, and I'm excited to talk a little bit more about the Matilda Effect.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Thank you. And so, yeah, as you were mentioning, yeah, you have a lot of stories. You've written a lot. Well, pretty much like a lot of books. How does those stories come up to you? Do you like base on some kind of events that you have in your life, or maybe you know about such events and you just place those characters and those stories around those events and build up this subject of matter in your book? How does it happen? Because yeah.
So that's a good question, and it's one of those things where once you've written a book, you look back and think, how did I do that? Where did that come from? But with the Matilda Effect, I mean, I do try and take a lot of inspiration from real life, actually. So the idea for the Matilda Effect actually came about because in 2014, there was a really lovely news story in the UK about an old man called Bernard Jordan. And he'd fought in the Second World War. And it was the 70th anniversary of the D-Day landings in Normandy. And he wanted to go to Normandy to sort of commemorate and remember all his fallen comrades. But he lived in a care home and he was nearly 90. And the staff were like, "You're not going, there's absolutely no way." But that didn't stop him, and he broke out of the care home and he got himself to Normandy, and he was there with his medals on the beach, and it became a really sort of lovely news story because everyone was sort of rooting for him to get there. And then when they eventually found him in Normandy and they brought him back, people were like waving flags and giving interviews. And I remember reading that story and just thinking, that's so lovely, that determination for an older person to go and do what they want to do. And I thought, what if I did something perhaps with a granddaughter rather than a grandson, and a granddad and a grandma? Why would someone break a granny out of a care home? What could that be for? And the ideas really sort of came from there. So it all was inspired by that real life man who broke out of his care home. And I kind of thought, okay, I want to write about a granny who does that, because I'm interested in writing female characters, and perhaps she does it with the help of a granddaughter. So why would they be breaking out? What could that be about? And then the idea kind of came from there. So yes, that's where the Matilda Effect story came from. Normally with most of my stories, there will be an element of real life, and I'll look at what's going on in the news, and I'll look at the really sort of small news stories that you see on like maybe page 7 of the paper. They're not like the front page newses, but the really kind of lovely, tiny little human stories. And I think, oh, that would be a great starting point for an idea, and I just kind of run with it. and go from there. So yeah, that's how the Matilda effect started. And then when I have hit upon something that I want to write about, and I very often think about what I was interested in when I was little. So I loved space, I loved science when I was growing up. I loved space so much that when I was 9 years old, I wrote to the President of the United States, George Bush, the first one, to ask. I'd heard that he was doing this space program, so I wrote a letter to say, please could I go up into space? He did not reply, unsurprisingly, to say yes you can, but that didn't stop me. I've always been really interested in sort of science and space and things like that. So I thought, what about having a girl who loves the same things that I did? And obviously, as a writer, I'm an inventor. I invent stories and plots and settings. So I thought, but it would be really cool to have a girl inventor who breaks her granny out of a care home for some reason. So the idea kind of came from there, really. And
I was also wanted to ask, like, the Matilda effect is about female inventors, young girls, adults, and inventions that have been stolen from women, giving credit to the male colleagues. So it's a story also about that, and a journey of seemingly never-ending and a little bit crazy adventures towards the truth. But it's quite well known that if we ask the author of any book, they will tell a lot more regarding the question what the book is about. So how would you define Matilda's effect?
I think that's a really good summary that you've given. I think maybe for those that don't know, perhaps haven't read it yet, on the surface, the book is, yes, about a 12-year-old girl who loves inventing and loves science. And she enters her best invention into the school science competition, and she doesn't win because nobody believes she's made it all by herself. And there are still a lot of people out there who think that girls don't like or can't do science or inventing, and girls can't possibly drill wood or cut metal. So I definitely wanted to sort of write about how girls definitely can do all those things. And Matilda's obviously really upset that she doesn't win, even though her invention's the best. And she talks to her granny Joss about how upset she is. And her granny says, well, I sort of know how you feel, because years ago, I was an astrophysicist and I discovered a brand new planet, but my boss claimed that he discovered it and he's about to be awarded the Nobel Prize. And so Matilda thinks, well, I'm not having that. Breaks granny out of the care home, and they go on this mad adventure all the way to Sweden to gate crash the Nobel Prize ceremony. So that's kind of what it's about on the surface. But I think for me, what it's really about is justice. And it's about making sure that credit is given where credit is due. Whether you've written a brilliant story, or you've discovered a brand new planet, or you've just created something, you should get the credit for that. It shouldn't be someone else who sort of lies and cheats and gets to take the glory. So it's about that sort of justice. But I also think it's about standing up for what's right. So Matilda and Granny Joss take it to the extreme. I'm not saying go to Sweden to stand up for what's right, but which is what they do. But it's about making sure that, if you see some wrongdoing, then try and call it out and stand up for what you believe is right, which is what Matilda and Granny Joss do. So I think it's about all those things, really.
Yes, I absolutely actually love the breaking the stereotype about, of course, girls not doing well things that men probably do and done for so many years. And this book actually really speaks about it loudly and very vividly. And also, what I love about Matilda is her character, her charisma. She's very outgoing. She's very she has a temper that is very hot, and she's making the statement. She's going out. She's even impacting the grandmother, who probably is more timid at this time of age. Mm. But she takes that charisma, and she takes that I guess from Matilda. And goes with the flow with her, like to this amazing adventure. And talking about adventures, how did you plan up this row of adventures? Like it's pretty crazy, actually. Like, it's almost impossible sometimes how they manage to end up in such situations as they did in the book. And as I was reading it, it blew my mind, actually. How could like a little girl with a grandma, with a dog at some point, ends up in air balloons on the top of Eiffel Towers, and survives and goes along the way? How does it happen, like in your mind?
It happens with a lot of luck and a lot of creative license. So I wouldn't recommend anyone attempting to recreate the journey, because there's a lot of me just sort of making sure that things go their way when in real life they may not. But how I kind of did it, I literally knew they had to. I knew they started in England, and I knew they had to get to Sweden, which is where the Nobel Prize ceremony takes place. So I just looked on the map and just kind of plotted where it would be likely that the route that they would take. And then I have a really, I can be a bit silly, and I just really enjoy really silly modes of transport. And so I thought, what's the funniest thing that could get them there? And so I thought it would be very funny to have Matilda break Granny Joss out of the care home, and for them to be like, yes, we've done it, we're on our way. And for the first mode of transport they find is a milk float, which is, I don't know if you have milk floats, but we so they basically go about 10 miles an hour. They're so slow. And so I thought it would be hilarious for them to have this kind of real, yeah, we're off, and then they're just stuck on this 10-mile-an-hour milk float down the motorway. And then I was just trying to think of just really elaborate different modes of transport. So the hot air balloon, I thought it would be hilarious to have a clown car in there. Matilda's mum and dad have a van in the shape of a dog. So I went sort of with the fur and the ears. So I was just really just thinking of, okay, what route are they most likely to take? What's the funniest mode of transport, or the most unlikely, perhaps the most challenging mode of transport that's going to get them there? So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of creative license as a writer, and I sort of was pulling a few strings, and I doubt in real life it would ever pull off. But yeah, that's kind of how I came up with it.
It's pretty amazing, actually. Incredible how to plot a story one, like, bit by bit. Yeah, just looking at the map and just plotting where those characters go. Yeah, it's incredible. and wrapping up, of course, like, it's pretty much said about the book, and we closed pretty much the plot, all of it. What would you wish for Lithuanian young readers to experience, or maybe what would you wish for the young readers who has the book and reads it, or is about to read?
Lots of things, really. I hope they find it a fun, crazy, madcap, adventurous read. I hope they just really enjoy it as a book to begin with. I hope it inspires them, though, to maybe do some inventing themselves, to look at different things they could discover or invent. And I kind of hope it inspires them to seek out unknown scientists. I mean, as I was saying before, I do a lot of research when I write my stories, once I've hit upon the idea that I want to write about. And I discovered a lady called Jocelyn Bell Burnell, who I'd never heard of before, but she was an astrophysicist in the 1960s, and she was the very first person to discover radio pulsars, which are like these kind of electromagnetic beeps in space. And she showed her findings to her boss, and Martin Ryle, and he used her work in his own work, and he went on to win the Nobel Prize, and Jocelyn Bell Burnell didn't. So there's a bit of Granny Joss based on Jocelyn Bell Burnell, and I hadn't even heard of Jocelyn Bell Burnell before I'd started researching. And there are loads of inventors, female inventors, that I just hadn't heard of before. I mean, I go and do school visits, and I ask children to name inventors, and they always say Isaac Newton or Albert Einstein or Alexander Graham Bell, who invented the telephone, and hardly anyone says a woman inventor. Whereas I learned about Mary Anderson, who invented the windscreen wipers. There were so many female inventors. So I hope this book inspires readers to go away and perhaps look up their own inventors, or look up some really interesting female inventors that I hadn't heard of before. So I hope it inspires them to do lots of things, but mostly I just want them to read it and really enjoy it.
Thank you so much. And I was sure also inspired by, like, when I was illustrating it, I was truly inspired to illustrate more of this book. It wasn't supposed to be like illustrated inside or anything. But as I was going on with the story, it was just so uplifting and so giving. I wanted to give back just to it and illustrate more, include more like little bits, and even if I could, even to give it a full body of a graphic novel, I would just do that.
Amazing.
Yeah, it would be incredible, because such stories really uplifts and inspires and gives you hope and just strength for fight for your beliefs. And
thank you. Well, thank you. I mean, on that, so like you were saying, Matilda's a really determined character, and she's really motivated, and so I hope it does inspire people, like we were saying before, to stand up for what's right. And she's very single-minded about her passion. So if you have a passion, to try and follow that, not necessarily saying you have to be single-minded about it, but if there's something you want to do, we'll try and do it. So there's another inspiration for Matilda. There's a sailor called Dame Ellen MacArthur, who in 2005, she was the first, she broke the world record for a solo circumnavigating the globe. And I read an interview with her. She's only like in her 30s now, so she was really young at the time. And she said that she first went sailing when she was 4, and then she decided when she was 8 to save up to buy her first boat, and it took her 3 years. And she would save her lunch money, she'd save her pocket money. She wouldn't. She'd only have like half a lunch, so that she could save the money. And I thought that's exactly the sort of thing that Matilda would do. And I was really inspired by that. So just having that sort of determination. So she's a very determined character. And also, just to say one more thing, I hope that people are also inspired by, I wanted to write about a kind of intergenerational relationship. So a granny with her granddaughter, because you don't really see a lot of that in children's books. But also I wanted, as we were saying, Granny Joss is quite quiet to begin with, and she just sort of goes along with it. But Matilda at first she always preferred her granddad. She thinks Granny's a bit boring and just does jigsaws and drinks tea. She doesn't really have a lot in common with her. But as the story goes along, Matilda really starts to see Granny as her own person, and the fact that she's had an amazing life and has had all these incredible, unpredictable experiences that come out throughout the course of the story. So I hope it makes people think about the fact that older people as well everyone has a story, and it's perhaps worth finding out a little bit more about grandparents and what they've done in their lives. So hopefully it inspires readers to do that as well.
Oh yes, of course. I wanted to say, that's a little bit, of course, the relationship with your grandfathers, like grandmas, it should be like noticed in this book, and then maybe more noticed in your own life. Maybe after reading it, maybe you'll just acknowledge more about your particular family member. Yes, so that's very sweet. Like that being included in the book. It's really it's actually really rare in the books for children. So yeah, and even being like including the grandmother in the book, it's not becoming any less unpopular or boring. It's actually really uplifting still, and very adventurous and very actually movie-like.
I always think really visually, so I can picture the scene in my head and then I'll write it. So I do think, so I'm pleased to hear you say it sounds sort of movie-like, because that's how I kind of write it. I imagine it sort of playing out and then I'll write that down. So yes, that's how I kind of write it. I sort of think movie-like too. But just going back, I mean, you mentioned that in my introduction, the Pre-Kronos Award, which, because this has been, Matilda Effect's been translated into many languages, including French, and it won the award, the Pre-Kronos Award, which I was really pleased about, because it's an award that celebrates intergenerational relationships in children's literature. So I'm really pleased that that's something that has come across from the story, just having grandchild and grandparent relationship that you don't often see in children's literature. So I'm glad that's resonated with a lot of people as well.
Yeah, that's pretty. Yeah, that's amazing. I have no words. So I don't know. Maybe thank you then, Ellie. It was really nice to meet you and to talk to you, to finally see you live. Yes, so now I'm going to also talk in Lithuanian a bit.
Okay.
But yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Ir Matildos efektą galima įsigyti visose knygynuose bei parduotuvėse Lietuvoje. Matilda laukia jūsų. Ir thank you so much for listening. Ačiū labai, kad klausėtės. Ir sėkmės skaitant, gerų nuotykių, good adventures for everyone. And see you soon. Okay, bye.
Bye.